Hello and welcome to the webinar, Understanding Fostering and Adopting Teens. My name is Courtney Williams, the host of America's Kids Belong's FosterCon webinar series. I welcome you to today's webinar. I'm excited about this conversation. With us today, we have Annika, Tracy, and Bobby, and they just share from a former foster youth, foster adoptive mom, and a foster adoptive dad, share their experiences. Whether you have and are already fostering or adopting teenagers, or you're considering it, I think you will love this conversation that goes into some of the nitty-gritty, some of the hard things, the realities, but also really encouraging you to get involved with teenagers who just need the hope and the love and the healing in families. So join me today for this webinar, Understanding Fostering and Adopting Teens.
And now I'd like to introduce you to our speakers for today. Today we have with us Annika, Tracy, and Bobby. Annika, we're going to start with you. Annika Barta is a former foster youth who spent 5 years in the foster care system as a teenager and a young adult. At the age of 26, she was adopted as an adult, displaying the truth that we never outgrow the need to belong. She's volunteered as a court-appointed advocate in Washington, also known as a CASA, and works as a graphic designer and photographer for Dreammakers, which is a nonprofit that's mission is to change the lives of youth who have aged out of foster care by connecting the community to their needs. Her heart is to advocate for seats to be added to the table as the lonely are invited into the sense of belonging. And we love that. We love that mission. We love your mission, Annika. Thanks for joining with us. Can you share more about your journey, what that was like in foster care and then being adopted as an adult?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Long story short, I'm just going to give like a really quick overview of my story. I was born into a home with my biological parents and a biological older brother. And I don't remember when the abuse started, but I know that by the time I was in the 6th grade, I was completely full of just hopelessness and suicidal ideation because I felt as if there's no way that I would be able to escape the abuse in every single form of that word that was occurring in my life on an almost daily basis. A lot of people have asked me, if you were aware of what was going on, why didn't you say anything? And I was not in a place, like many youth, I was not in a place where I could say something. I was threatened to violence if I were to ever say anything. And so I became the biggest protector of my abusers because I felt like either I was going to die because of them, or if I said something, then I was also going to die in that sense. And so I was really stuck in this place where there was no way out. And so many years passed where I contemplated a will to live because I didn't think my present or my future would ever become brighter. And I came to know God when I was in middle school, and it was my faith in this community around me that really helped me find a reason to belong, find a reason to keep living. And surprisingly, when I was in high school, not thinking that anyone would ever be able to help me get free, I was called into the office at my school one day, and I was not a kid who would ever get in trouble or anything. So I felt like, oh, this has to be about college or about planning for the future, something like that. And to my shock, my counselor sat me down, asked me to close the door behind me, and said, there have been X amount of reports about your general welfare. And to me, I thought, how would anyone have known anything was happening? But really, I had some very attentive teachers who were looking at my grades and looking at my schoolwork and my behavior based off of that. And just different people in the community who just had little inklings that something was going on because I didn't let that be known, but somehow they had intuition and they chose to follow that intuition and to say something and to be the eyes and ears for me when I didn't think I had anyone watching. And so after a series of events unfolded, I was placed into foster care from a scene of a crime because the day that I was brought into an office and they were questioning me about child abuse, I was sent home because I had lied to the counselor saying that it was about a friend who was being abused, not myself, because it was too high risk for me to admit I was being abused because what if I was not removed from my home that day? And so I vowed to come back to school the next day, and coincidentally that night, crime happened against me and I was placed into foster care. So after being in traditional foster care for 2 years, I aged out without permanency and then was in extended foster care for 3 years. And so spent a total of 5 years within the system. And then long story short, my foster parents actually were my youth pastors. And it was while I was at church that when I turned 19, a new couple came to our church as worship pastors. And I was somebody who was very closed off to adults. I didn't think I could ever trust anyone and had no interest in wanting to getting to know them. I thought adults are just there to tell you what to do or to hurt you. And so very closed off, walls up high, and just really quickly my heart was able to trust them. I saw that they paid a lot of attention to me. They gave me a lot of care. They included me in things. They saw me in a world where I didn't think I mattered at all. And so throughout the years, this desire to belong, to have parents, and to have a family never went away. And though I tried to deny it for many years, the more I got to know this couple, the more that desire just resurfaced and it became a reality when I was 26 and I had voiced the desire to want parents, and they had said, all along we'd vowed that we would be whatever you wanted us to be in your life. And so I was adopted as an adult. And just like you said, the desire for me to have parents or to have family did not ever lessen the older I got. So it does really show like that everyone deserves that. And every child, every youth desires that and deserves to have that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing. I know it's probably not easy to share your story all the time, but you have such a powerful voice. And especially for the topic of today of understanding teens, your lived experience is going to be very impactful for people. So I appreciate you being willing to come on and share with us today. Okay, now we're going to hear from Tracy. Tracy Rudd is the director of Colorado Kids Belong, a local chapter of America's Kids Belong. Some people don't understand like the whole concept of how it all works. America's Kids Belong is the umbrella, and then under America's Kids Belong, we have state chapters. So she's the director of our Colorado chapter of America's Kids Belong. She is a parent to 4 kids ranging in age from 26 down to 18. Her oldest were part of a package deal when she married her husband. And then she met her younger kids through one of our I Belong project video shoots. Her son moved in with her and her family in 2020 when he was almost 15. And then later his sister joined their family as a kinship placement. And then they adopted her when she was 17 and a half. Just, when was that, Tracy? Last year?
Yeah, just
Just
last November.
Okay. So being a parent to several teens that have experienced trauma and all that comes with that and being part of their family in these non-traditional ways, she's worked hard to bind with each of them and to have that sense of belonging for them and just build that connection. I've seen her work on that. I worked for America's Kids Belong and used to work under Tracy. So I've known her for quite a while now, and I've seen her do this really well with your kids. So Tracy, thank you for joining us. And can you share with us a little bit about your journey into adopting teenagers and what that looked like and how it unfolded?
Yeah, thank you for having me. We didn't expect to grow our family through adoption. It wasn't really the plan, but it was about 5 years before we met our now kids that we learned more about foster care. And my husband and I actually went through all the foster parent training so that we could support my brother's family who was fostering at the time. And that just opened our eyes to so much. And then eventually I started working with the Colorado Kids Belong team and had just been getting involved in different ways. At 19, we were, our youngest at the time graduated high school. And so we we're kind of not officially empty nesters, but kind of approaching that season. And then I started to be the director of our I Belong project here in Colorado. And the very first video shoot that I went to, I met my now kiddos. Did not go there thinking that day. And I had actually heard a lot about them because of my role with the county that we were working with. I had heard about their case already and heard some things about each of them. But I went to that video shoot day and I knew that the county had already decided to separate the two of them, which is a controversial thing. My kids both have said they actually think that turned out to be good, that they were separated for a season. They got to stay connected, but they both got to have some space to do some healing individually and stuff, and thankfully got to come back together eventually. So it was a very interesting experience of when I was in the room when my son was being interviewed for the video shoot that day. I'm a person that prays, and I just felt like he was being put on my heart. And I asked God, like, am I supposed to be paying attention to this kid in a different way than all the rest of the kids? And right after I prayed that prayer, he answered a question. He was asked what he wants to do when he grows up. And he said, I want to be a diesel mechanic, I think. And I was like, okay, God, I'm listening, because my father was a career diesel mechanic and our oldest son is a diesel mechanic. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. So went home that day and told my husband, I think I met a boy that maybe belongs in our family. And he laughed and said, I don't think you can have this job if this is how it's going to go. And one thing led to another. We inquired with the county about if we could be a a good fit, a good adoptive placement for him. And things just progressed. And actually, like 2 days before the world shut down for the COVID pandemic, the caseworker came to our house and said that we were a good fit. And like she had to check and make sure we had a bedroom for him and all that. So the beginning of our relationship with him was during the COVID pandemic, where he was just kind of stuck with us. He got to move in on Mother's Day of that year, less than a month before his 15th birthday. And then we had built a relationship with his sister, who had moved to a different house before he moved to our house. And so over the years, we had continued to have a relationship with her, and she had called us her aunt and uncle. And sadly, she moved around several more times. And then we got a call from the county asking if she'd spent the night at our house many times, but the county calling saying, can she come to your house tonight? And so she came that night and didn't leave. So we adopted her just less than a year ago. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Tracy.
Mhm.
We'd love to hear your insights as we progress today. Some of these thoughts as a adoptive mom of teenagers when they entered your care. So, and then last but not least, Bobby. Bobby Williams is my husband, and he's been with me on this crazy journey of foster care and adoption for 17 years now. We've fostered over 70 children and youth. We have 9 children, 6 of whom were adopted. We're currently licensed in the state of Colorado as a therapeutic foster home. Bobby is a custom home builder during the day and a business owner, which has been great for our family because he's often flexible. When we have a new placement or we have a need, he's even taken kids to work with him before, teenagers who may be kicked out of school for the day or something. He's been able to take them to work. So yeah, just has a lot of experience as a foster dad, and it's always good to have the male voice joining us as well. So Bobby, share a little bit about our transition in our house when we entered this, thinking like, there's no way we'll ever welcome teenagers into our home, to now that's primarily what we do. So share a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I don't get to do this too often. I get to watch my lovely bride often on the screen, so it's fun to jump in with her. And I'm just pumped to hear and learn from you, Annika and Tracy. So, but thanks, guys, for having me. Yeah, our journey has been a journey, and we started out not knowing what we didn't know, probably like a lot of us. And when we did start, I would say there just wasn't a lot of information, and we went off to a few conferences that we were able to plug ourselves into, and we were hearing a lot of things such as, don't disrupt the birth order. At the time, we had some natural born kids in our family, and that raised an internal flag, because we did have the sense of wanting to help. We just didn't know, but because of the limited information I think we had, and the few people that we trusted to try to speak into what was best for us, I think it initially really narrowed us down into that, we need to stay infant type age. And that's not all bad advice, but we just didn't know what we didn't know. Thankfully, Courtney and I, we've tried to just always communicate, hey, we're hearing this, but we really have a desire and a burden for this. How do you think we can navigate that? So we started to navigate I think we could parent our kids through why they aren't the oldest child, or why did we bring someone into our family that wasn't natural born, just that whole elephant in the room conversation. Hey, they disappeared and they're my brother. We kind of navigated through that a little bit. Also, had people say, older kids might expose your kids to like swear words and, sex, drugs, and rock and roll type discussions. And, again, made us pause like, well, I mean, they're going to hear it eventually, and some of it might be prematurely, but we kind of navigated through that, but we were still just stuck because everyone wants to do what's healthy for their family as best they can in the immediate. But what really changed us was we went on a trip to pick up our daughter. And as we were leaving, she was 9 months at the time, 9 months old. And as we were leaving, we both turned around and literally physically saw, I don't know, probably 50 older kids ranging in from like 8 years old up to 18, just sobbing. And it struck us. And we asked the person that was with us, said, what's going on? And they said, in all transparency, they've been in this home for years, and they continuously see younger kids taken into forever homes, and it crushes them every time because they have this sense of like, why can't someone come pick me up? And it honestly just shattered Courtney and I. We went home feeling all sorts of emotions. Did we do what's right? We have this little beautiful girl, but it was just heartbreaking. But we still kept it internal between her and I. Um, and lo and behold, shortly thereafter, our oldest son at the time, Eli, came to us just out of nowhere. And we really tried to protect our conversations from our kids, just as Courtney and I tried to navigate that. And he just said, "Hey, Mom and Dad, have you ever thought about bringing an older kid into our home? I would love to have an older brother or sister or something like that." And it just kind of shocked us, like, well, where did this even come from? But we were looking for something like an excuse, right? And this really triggered us to really be open to it. And it was really, I think, if I think back, probably one of the first times in my life that I truly believe that my younger children taught me something in life, and it was right for Courtney and I. And what we learned may not be right for everyone, but that's how we went, to directly answer your question, from being really hesitant to fast forward a few years to being open. Our kids just said, "Hey, what are you guys doing? Let's do this." And we did. And pretty much a few weeks later, we had referrals for older kids. And that really, as the last lesson in that time, really put into our mind the absolute real need for families, people, adults to come alongside the astronomical amount of older children that are just waiting and watching, like, hey, I desire this so much. So that's our journey in a nutshell.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that was international adoption. We were foster parents. We adopted internationally, and then through that, I would even say, this is a whole nother rabbit trail, which we won't get on today, but our hearts and minds were open towards the kids right here in the United States who are waiting and who we didn't know. We didn't know, the foster care crisis. We didn't know a lot about it, even though we were foster parents, which is kind of sad thinking, we were in small town North Dakota. We were a licensed foster family. We often did get little kids, and the teenager thing wasn't before us. But now, years down the road, and as we've moved to Colorado, and just working nationally for America's Kids Belong, seeing the primary need across the nation right now is for people to foster and adopt teens. And that's why we're doing this webinar, because people are so afraid of it, like we aren't sure what it looks like. And I think people's eyes just need to be opened. Even current foster families, I'm sure a lot of you listening are current foster families who just need to maybe have a little nudge and a little door opening to, oh, maybe I can welcome a teen. And I would say, if you're on that fence, listen to the rest of this. But also maybe even just try respite care. Try like, hey, I could do respite care for some teenagers for a little while and see teenagers aren't that scary. So, when we think about foster care, a lot of people get in their minds of young kids, right? And we think about, even as foster parents, sometimes people say, well, if I foster an infant or I foster a younger child, it's going to be easy. And we have found as foster parents many times, we get this brand new infant from the hospital or a placement of an infant or even a toddler. And we often don't have a lot of background on them, right? They're just born or they haven't really been around the system. And so there's not a lot of background. Where on the flip side, the teenagers that have entered our care, we often know a lot about them. Like the caseworkers can give us a little more information because they're well informed on them, or they can go to the teachers or the schools and be like, hey, tell me about Susie, and then they can get some information. So I feel like for us, we get more information when it's a teenager. Tracy, can you share a little bit about that? Like, how can we as foster parents be more like in the know about teenagers than we might a little kiddo?
Yeah. Partly what I thought of when you said that was just the fact they know themselves too. Like they can share with us things about themselves. And they've lived enough life that they're just more known by the people around them. Typically, also often when kids move, like a lot of kids that end up in foster care have often been moving around. So sometimes there isn't a teacher or somebody like that that actually knows them well. But yeah, our son and daughter both knew themselves, even though they maybe didn't know themselves well at the time. I was telling my daughter just recently that we need to watch Runaway Bride with her so she can see the scene of when she has to pick how she likes her eggs, because sometimes the trauma and the experiences, it made our kids not know that they could pick how they like things or whatever. So getting to know themselves is important also. But definitely, I think it's very interesting, depending on the length of time that a kid has been in care and some things like that. And depending on the caseworker, you can often know quite a bit about a kiddo. We personally, before before the caseworker even let him know that we were interested in adopting him, she wanted to, we had, I think, a phone meeting and then an in the office meeting, and then she came to our house. she was pretty hard on us. She was like, this kid's been in care long enough that, and she'd been his caseworker for a while. She really wanted to make sure we were fully aware and ready. And she asked us some hard questions, knowing what she knew about him and his history and things like that. And she just wanted to be open with us, which was great. It was great for us to hear those things and to have to kind of talk through them. And actually, none of it surprised us. I do remember the first time she came to our house. So it was kind of her getting to know us a little bit better at that point. And we have older kids, a son and a daughter, and our daughter had just graduated high school at the time. And she said something about, by the way, I think I should let you know that if he ends up thinking that your daughter's cute or pretty or whatever, he might hit on her or something. And I was like, well, she's beautiful and very likely he will think that, but she can fend for herself. She's enough older and stuff. But just kind of that awareness of like realizing, okay, because we had actually thought about it a handful of years earlier, about adopting a teenager that was waiting, a teenage boy, and realized that him and our daughter were too close in age, that it wouldn't be good for the two of them to become brother and sister. But for our adopted son and our daughter, it actually was a great fit, and they've been great friends and stuff. Just that interesting thing of a caseworker being able to ask the hard questions of the potential parents, foster parents or adoptive parents. And sadly, also, there ends up being kind of a bad rap sheet. I actually said to my adopted daughter last night that we were doing this and mentioned a few of the questions, and she got a pretty good big kick out of the thought of, yeah, there's a bad rap sheet. She's like, oh, people would always write down all the bad stuff about me. She was in foster care for 8 years, and we were her 15th placement home that she was in. So lots of people had lots of things to say about her, and the things that make it onto paper, sadly, are often negative. So I think that to me is a point also of making sure that we're open to what the whole child is and not just the things that make it onto the caseworker's list of stuff. We need to go in eyes wide open and be ready for whether they're going to think our daughter's cute or something like that, or the other hard stuff that might be there, but really hoping and looking for the whole kid and what else is there. So yeah, it is an interesting space of getting to know them. For my kiddos, it was actually interesting because of my job. I had been in on some meetings about them before the IBP shoot even. So I actually had heard some pretty hefty, hard stuff even before I met them. So going into a relationship with them, already knew some of the hard stuff that had made the list. But just had to work hard to keep that positivity of looking for and working hard to find the kid that was below all the stress and trauma.
Yeah. That's great, Tracy. You bring up some good points that, as foster parents, like I said, we feel like we often get more information on a teenager. Not always, like you said, sometimes there's just not, but typically we feel like we get quite a bit of information. And as parents, it's our job to suss out if that's a good placement for us. We don't want to have a kid come into our care and then be like, well, we knew this, but we just thought we were could get past this, or we thought this, and then have the kid have to move on. Like the last thing we want is those 14 homes, 9 homes, however many homes. We want kids to have a place where they can belong for as long as they need to, right? So it is really important that foster parents do not just accept a placement because you get that phone call, not just accept a teen because there's a need for teens. Like, hey, but I also feel like there's a point of some people maybe being like, okay, I really can now, like, take that next step towards teenagers or broaden what I've been open to a little bit. But it is very smart. We had that very situation. We had a teenage boy just with us. He was with us as emergency placement and then moved into a foster home. He was there for a while. The foster home ended up having their first baby. And so they put in their notice saying, hey, he needs to go somewhere else where our first child's born. And so he was going to naturally come here. And we were like, at first we were like, yeah. We know this kid. And then we found out that he has a major crush on our daughter who's a year younger than him. And he's a big boy and 18 and she's 17. We're like, now that we know that, this just isn't the best place. And so we had to say no, even though we already had a relationship with him. We like this kid. We thought we'd do well with him, but there's still sometimes the right thing to be like, you know what, this isn't the best place for him because of this situation. And we just have to suss those things out as parents. Bobby, what are some behaviors and diagnoses we've had in our home when we welcome teens? And flip, like, how do you view teenagers when they enter our home, even though they might have this long rap sheet?
Yeah. I've learned a lot in this department in our journey of this, but I would say the list that I came up with were we've had kids that have had tags on them: ADHD, suicidal ideations, bipolar, oppositional defiant disorder, PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance abuse. I'm sure there's a few, but those were like a few more, but those were what I came up with. I mean, there's just all sorts of letters and combinations out there that matter. And the one that I would probably add on to that list now that I'm saying out loud is, and it's probably not a diagnosis, but just the overwhelming sense of shame that I seem to get out of kids that come into our care, particularly older children. And I view them as we view them as absolute just precious individuals, and we don't discount those diagnoses to the point of just sweeping them like dust under a rug type thing, as you would say. But I have over the years really tried to, as we connect to these kids that come into our home for a while, to just encourage them that these don't define they don't define them. And so that's something that I have to completely remind myself all the time, and try to, when it's healthy, remind the kids that are in our home. You know, when we see kids walking up our steps, again, something I preach to myself is what I just said. But also, these are individuals that need a safe place right now. They need people who will go out of their way to show them that they matter and that they belong. They belong in general. They don't belong in this situation that they're in, but that they belong. I think, if that makes sense. I think I've heard you guys say that on this platform quite a bit. And so ultimately, lots of diagnosis, but I try not to, and summing it up, I try not to let that define my view of these people. Like, oh, we got another ADHD kid coming up here. That gets us nowhere. It's good to be aware, but see them as an opportunity to hear another story, and another opportunity to give a individual, a child, ultimately a safe place.
Yeah, it may seem like we're kind of kicking this off with some hard topics, but honestly, this is what seems to hold people up a lot. Is they're like, oh, you know, you might have one of these diagnoses in a 5-year-old, but it seems different when it's a 15-year-old. So we kind of want to talk about these things and air these things right away and talk about the reality of them. Annika, can you speak a little bit about what Bobby's talking about? Like, these teens are coming, they need a safe landing place. They need a caring adult or adults to show them that they matter. What was that like for you, and what helped you have that feel a sense of belonging and like, oh, I can start to heal a little bit because what was it?
Yeah, I would say for most youth and most teens who are entering foster care or have been in the foster care system, having a safe adult, even just one, or a safe place to land is not something that they've ever experienced. And so for me, it wasn't like there was no expectations in the way that like I didn't know how to act as somebody who felt safety, who felt like I was loved, who felt like I belonged somewhere. And all my behaviors definitely displayed that because all I had ever known was survival. And so for me, I did all I could. Like on the outside, someone could look at me and be like, wow, she has some extreme behaviors, extreme, emotional swings, like so inconsistent, like just all over the place. I dealt with so many external things. Someone on the outside could very easily say, this is going to be too much. And there were a lot of people in my life who said that without knowing what I was enduring. But I was just striving, trying to do whatever I could to try to prove to myself that I had a place somewhere in the world. And so that came off as a lot of defensiveness, a lot of I'm having to basically be my own advocate. And it came out in really bad ways. But the difference was having adults who actually gave me a safe, not only just physical safety. So when I was placed into foster care, though, of course, I don't think any former foster youth would ever say foster care was a perfect experience. Like I endured a lot of hard stuff in it, but being placed in foster care absolutely saved my life. I know for a fact I would not be sitting here today at all. I thought my life would end by the time I was at least like 17. So being placed into the system gave me physical safety for the first time ever. I was able to lay my head down without fear of something happening to me. And then the emotional safety of having adults who, no matter what I did, no matter the ugliest behaviors I had, who were consistent and constant in saying, we are here for you. We still love you. We accept you as you are. We'll get through this together. That was the first time I'd ever experienced an adult being consistent and unwavering in how their heart was towards me. And that actually was really what allowed me to heal, because for once, when I was able to just rest and knowing that I had a place no matter what, I feel like I was able to regulate and to just calm down and then start my healing journey from there. But if I wouldn't have had a safe place physically and emotionally to land, my healing journey wouldn't have been able to begin because I was still just trying to fight to prove something.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So, I mean, we've witnessed that with kids and that healing, it takes time. It's not like it's this automatic, oh, I feel safe, I'm just going to start healing. But the feeling safe and being safe are two different things. Can you think of any things that helped you feel safe?
Yeah, I would say, like, I know, like, earlier referred to, like, the physical and emotional because I think it definitely is, like, a two-part, but, when it comes to physical, having the room I was in my placement wasn't it was mine fully, but, like, there were still a lot of things in the room from the foster family that weren't mine, but the fact that they let me paint the walls, like, they let me with the space that I had, they let me really make it my own. Yeah, I got to paint the walls, I got to pick out bedding, I got to decorate, and that was the very first time in my life I ever got to do any of those things. I really every day I'd come home and there would be things that I picked out that I set up where I wanted it to be, where it felt like it was my own space to just relax. That was huge for me to feel safe because I'm like, these are my items, and I didn't have a fear of someone taking them away or think a fear of someone removing them. They were things that were consistently there. And then when it came to emotional, there's a lot, but just like a few things off the top of my head, knowing that there was an open door to talk about or to voice any concerns or anything, that was huge for me because I did not come from a life where I had a voice at all. So kind of like even Casey like referred to earlier, like the teenagers, a lot of them for the first time once they're safe are going to be starting to learn about themselves and what they like and making decisions. Like I never had a voice in many choices in my life until I was with a foster family. And so that was huge for me. It was like, oh, I have a say in things. That made me feel safe. Um, knowing that there was a lot of grace extended to me, that I had room to fail, I had room to mess up, I had room to challenge things or question things, and that wasn't gonna be shut down or I wasn't gonna be, like, sent away just for asking a question or for, like, if I accidentally did something I wasn't supposed to, I wasn't gonna just be removed or abandoned. That was huge, just having that. Yeah, knowing that they were consistently gonna be there regardless of how I was gonna be.
I love that. And both of you, some things that you said made me think of how for kids, especially older kids, teens, they're in that season of getting to know themselves anyways, but with their hard journeys, the trauma they've experienced and possibly some labels of ADHD or whatever it might be, helping them that when they can learn what maybe ADHD looks like in their own brain, that is actually empowering. Instead of this label that they don't want to wear, it actually has created some freedom for both of my kids whenever they've figured out some different parts of the way that their brain works or their trauma responses or whatever it might be. It's actually helped them grow and find some healing, and it's been good instead of being scared of those labels. I mean, I'm sure there have been seasons when they've been like, "Don't call me that. Don't say that's me." But as they're growing and healing, they're owning some of those things and being able to learn how to communicate it to a boss or somebody like that.
Yeah, for sure. Continuing on some hard topics, as Bobby mentioned, most of the teenagers we've had in our care have come with suicidal ideations. You know, sometimes that means we have to move things in our house or just talk to them maybe a little differently or talk about different things. And Annika, that was true for you as well. Can you share like why is the rate for suicidal ideations and thoughts? Why is it so much higher, do you feel, for teens in care? And what can foster parents do to support them? Maybe things I should do, or maybe some things I shouldn't do, or any tips you've got for foster parents?
Yeah, I would say in my experience, and even just from being someone who's connected to a lot of former foster youth who are in the system as teenagers, that is, I don't think there's one friend that shares my experience that did not express that they had suicidal ideation while being in foster care as a teen. And I think that a huge part of that is regardless of why you were put into the system, whether it's neglect or abuse or poverty, or I mean, there's so many different reasons why people enter. But for all of us, being the person who is like the kids who are placed into care, we are suffering the consequences of someone else's action. And that is a very unjust and unfair thing for us. But it also, instead of making us, for many of us, instead of us hating the people or like being angry at the people who caused this to happen for us. Like in my case, instead of me hating my abusers, that abuse caused me to hate myself. So self-hatred is at all-time high when you're the victim of someone else's actions. And I would say that's like a shared sentiment between my friends and I who have this experience. And so for me, that's really what caused my, I guess, suicidal ideation was the self-hatred, thinking the people who brought me into this world don't even want me so much that they like would rather hurt me. And so what's the reason for me to be alive? Like it also, a lot of shame is involved because especially when you're in foster care, there's not a ton of, in my experience, I didn't have a lot of, I guess, like advocates while I was in the system from caseworkers. It's almost like, oh, you're older, like you guys expressed, you're older, so you're most likely going to age out even though you're legally free for adoption. Like, it's just like you're being prepared for knowing you're going to navigate life alone. And so that's a really, really hopeless thing. I mean, I was glad I was physically safe, but having this thought that like, oh, my tomorrow is still going to be me struggling through life alone is not an exciting future to look forward to. So that was definitely a part of it. And then a huge thing is just carrying the weight of so many years of trauma, and a lot of times feeling like you're alone carrying it can make it feel like I don't see a way that my tomorrow can look better than my past. Because though I'm not in the situation of my past anymore, it's still something I'm carrying daily in my thoughts and my behaviors and my circumstances. And so I think there's just so many reasons why that it can feel like that's the only option out. And I'm so thankful. Like, I thank God that I'm still here. And I mean, life is way more beautiful than I ever could have imagined it could be. And a huge part of that was my foster parents, and it was other adults in my life who spoke not just like positive affirmations, like you are loved, but truly showed me those things, because I had a bunch of things I was convinced of, like, my life isn't worthy, like I don't matter, no one would care if I was here. And it was really the adults in my life who showed me through their daily actions and their daily words that those things were not true. And I think that having an open door policy, especially with my foster mom, I was much closer to her. And so just like having her be there, like I'm sure she could tell, because I did struggle with self-harm for many years as well. And that was something that I tried to hide, but it was pretty obvious, and it was brought up, and I carried a ton of shame. I mean, for many years I struggled with that, even almost into like early adulthood. And it was like an addiction, and it was something where I was like, I'm gonna have to hurt myself, because I just felt like that was my only way to to punish myself for everything that happened, though none of it was my fault. And it wasn't until later that I was able to learn that I didn't cause anything to happen. But her knowing that I was struggling and having conversations with me that were not shaming and were not punishing were huge. She never, she was always just like, let's talk about this. Like, my door's open. Anything you're feeling, there's nothing that'll scare me. Like, she let me voice whatever I needed to voice. And I mean, I remember like the day I like threw away my razor blades and all that, like she was the first person I called, and I was just like, thank you for being there for me. Like, I want you to know like that I'm deciding that like I know that I don't need to do this anymore, and like I'm ready to move forward with my life, and like to believe that there's hope for, healing and all that stuff. But feel like if she was someone who was punishing me and who caused me fear about what I was struggling with, that I wouldn't have even wanted to like include her in those things. And so I think that's like one thing that foster parents can do, is just not being afraid to have those conversations, but doing it with gentleness and grace, and like leaving the door open and just asking like, how can I support you? You can talk about counseling, or you can talk about like, what are some resources that we can find for you? Just not being afraid to address it, I think, is a huge thing, because just talking about it, I think, makes it more real to the youth who's struggling with it, and it makes them feel even seen in the midst of it.
That's beautiful. And thanks for sharing. And just gives us hope as foster parents to know, I mean, hope, but also a sense of we've got a job to do, right? And we got to take it seriously and see these kids and the value and their worth, but ultimately show them their value and their worth, and how big of a difference it really can make when they're able to see that through us and feel that through us in our actions. So yeah, thinking about all these things we've talked about already, understanding that teens will often have big emotions, often have some big behaviors because of the things they've gone through. And we need to not look at those behaviors as, teenagers being naughty or out to get us or whatever it may be, but really understanding like there's a reason behind these behaviors. There's a reason why they're acting this way. And ultimately, we need to, as foster parents or adoptive parents, we need to connect with the teenagers. Tracy, why is connection so important? And what are some things that you've done to help build connection with your teens?
One of the things that stands out to me from training, foster parent training, trauma understanding from Dr. Karen Purvis is the whole idea of that consequences need to be like the small little part of what we do, and that empowerment and connection need to be bigger, and connection needs to be the biggest amount of what we do. That just stuck with me big time. So even just the first few months of our son living with us, I remember multiple times, like my husband and I reminding each other, we need to make sure we connect. Like it's so easy with a teenager to feel like we need to correct them or, I don't know, just help fix the issue or something like that. But really changing that lens to thinking, okay, we got to work on this connection. And really part of it for me was even our son, 6 foot tall, 15 years old, living with new people. He'd been in foster care for 4 years and thinking, okay, if I was in his shoes, what would I be thinking? What would I be needing? And I can't even fathom half of the experiences that he's had and things like that. But just really thinking about he ne- he doesn't trust us. He doesn't trust people and adults in general. And so how do we spend time building trust? It's time, it's connection, it's having those conversations, it's just helping him open up. I spent a lot of time just I think of it like drawing him out. There was a lot of silence even, especially those first couple of years, or actually even just last night. He still lives at home. He's 20, works night shifts. I don't see him very often, but I'd seen him earlier in the evening and it said, "How are you?" And he's like, "Good, I'm good." And then he was up taking a shower. He'd come out of the bathroom right by my bedroom. And I was like, "Hey, bud, how are you really?" And he actually walked in and kneeled down and like had a full conversation. And I'm pretty stressed about XYZ. And I just have realized I need to do more to draw him out, that even after 5 years of being my boy, he still needs reminded that he can trust me and share more, especially if it's something that feels negative to him. So I think time, consistency, those are two things that really help build that connection. I think also creating space. I'm a person that often can be too busy. It's just kind of my nature to stay busy, and have really had to pay attention to, no, I might just need to sit down on the couch next to him, even if we talk about something silly or don't talk at all, because that will build to where then he's ready to open up about something else later. And so definitely just thinking for these kids, that trust has been broken with other adults, sometimes over and over and over again, and with multiple adults. So we have to work extra hard on our end to be consistent, to create that time, to ask those questions and draw them out, and just to do that hard work. I also think of, I mean, Dr. Karen Purvis, she talks about it in the sense of being careful to not do much correcting or giving consequences. There is a time and place for that. And I think even that first summer, but definitely throughout our journey with teenagers, really grateful that I had had that concept in my head, because I can remember a time when our boy needed a consequence. He had broken our trust and it was a pretty big deal, but that thankfully we all three just sat down. I remember my husband was sitting on the stairs. I was sitting on the couch. I think our son sat on the floor. Like we were all just, we sat right where we were and it just asked some questions and spent some time, because he thought he was going to have to move out, and just to help reassure, like, no, that is not what this is, but it's also okay that, or it's not okay that you lied to us and did these things, but that wasn't even in our mind that you would be moving out because of this. So really making sure we make those connections with them as much as possible. And I think for teenagers, it's also being playful. I'm not the most fun, playful person, but my husband is. So for the two of them, it's been really cool to watch if they play a video game together or whatever they might do, that's building that connection. And they actually have the two of them, for a grown-up boy and a man to make a father-son connection, an emotional connection the way they have, is pretty amazing to watch. Like sometimes when I see them hug, I'm just amazed at like the depth of emotion that is there between the two of them, and connection is what has gotten them there. And actually even counseling, we've done family counseling together and things like that too. When he moved in with us, knowing that it was for adoption, we dove in a little bit different than if it was just moving in as a foster placement. We dove into family counseling pretty quickly.
Yeah, great tips, Tracy. And the only thing I would add to that is connection. Sometimes you need to find some like interests, and maybe you need to learn something new. Most kids that come into our care, I don't know why, but they all seem to like anime. I don't like anime. I don't know anything about it. But sometimes, if they're drawing anime, I might need to sit down and like, tell me what you're drawing. Explain to me who this character is and what do you like about this character? And just ask some questions and show interest, even though I don't really care about anime, but I care about this child. So I'm going to show them some interest in the things they're interested in. And then try to find some things that you guys can enjoy together. And might be board games, it might be hiking, it might be basketball, it might be all sorts of things, but try to find something, some way that you can play with them, like Tracy kind of mentioned at the end there. Speaking of playing, Bobby, I know you are really good at playful engagement and oftentimes being able to like bring a kid down from like a high state of emotion or fear, or when they first enter our doors, of bringing in playful engagement. It's funny, Bobby and I actually didn't even notice this for many years, but we had this one caseworker a few years back, and she was sitting us down. She was, you just do so well with this teenager, and I've noticed it's because you guys play with her so much. Like, you have playful engagement back and forth, even like when you guys are giving her a consequence or you guys are chatting about hard things. I'm like, we do? And then she started telling us all these examples that she's noticed of us doing. I'm like, oh, I guess we do just naturally kind of do that. But I think it's a big deal with teenagers. So Bobby, explain like what is playful engagement and how, maybe some examples of how you've helped teens calm down or feel more comfortable in our home through using playful engagement.
Yeah, I've had the most opportunity, I think, oddly enough, when they're walking up our steps and the doors are opened. I can think of one young man in particular. I opened the door and he had this like beard that a 50-year-old would probably have, and I was like, "Bro, nice beard," and it just, I mean, I'm just being kind of, and he's like, "Really?" And we just kind of start off the conversation like that, and it's a stress deal when you're entering doors for the first time. I can't imagine, honestly. I've been on the receiving end. I've not been in Annika's position of having to do that. It's got to be stressful. So I am, in general, kind of one of those guys. When you see a naughty little kid doing something naughty, I'm probably the guy laughing. I'm probably that guy. So I've just been naturally, I think, the guy that can diffuse situations through just, hey, nice beard, man, stuff like that. Or, we've had a few young ladies come up and they get the head thing and the finger going and they're in your face or whatever. And it's like, woo, I see the steam coming out of your ears, sweetheart. Like, let me go get an ice pack real quick to calm the situation down. I mean, it's borderline sarcasm, right? But and I don't want to encourage sarcasm, because sarcasm actually in this sphere of the world can actually come across pretty not well. We've had some people just flat out say, some kids say, yeah, sarcasm, don't do that to me. I want to punch you over it, type thing. And it's like, okay, lesson learned. But that said, try to just like take the chill pill every once in a while. I think I've said that on a past podcast. Every once in a while, realize, again, remind yourself, these guys are coming with all sorts of stuff, emotions, lack of sleep, lack of food, don't trust you, the connection hasn't been made. And so you're going to be able to either be defensive, offensive, or kind of just try to diffuse it and give them that safe place. And for me, it's been a natural thing to just kind of diffuse it through, hey, I hear you, but let's calm down a little bit and try this again. Natural ways. I heard Tracy, I think, say, playing a game. I'm not a big video gamer person, never have been, but sometimes you just got to sit in and be in that safe place for them. Go shoot some hoops, go for a walk, go for a hike. Anything can be playful as long as it's something they enjoy, quite frankly. So that's, in a nutshell, how I think I've been naturally able to be successful with a lot of the youth that come into our home. It's been fun.
Yeah, and one thing you mentioned but didn't go into, but also just the diffusing of situations when a kid's lid is flipped. Like, we can't have that reasoning conversation with them, right? So we got to help them close their lid. And so if that means joking around for a little bit, then joke around for a little bit, right? Till they're calmed down. If that means going outside and not talking at all and just shooting hoops, then find that thing that this kid needs that's going to help them close their lid when their lid is flipped, whether it's against you, whether it's against somebody else. Like, they need that example of how to bring themselves back down to a regulated sense. And as foster parents, we've got a huge role to play in that, because a lot of times these kids haven't been shown, even as teenagers, like, they've lived a lot of life and don't really have those tools. They don't have those go-to tools yet. So their go-to tool is, I'm going to start cussing. I'm going to start punching a wall. I'm going to start just hide off in the bedroom, right? So the more we can engage with them and they feel like, okay, these people they're not leaving. And sometimes it does mean they need to go, they want space. And that is the one thing that I always like to bring up with teenagers is, when we hear from Dr. Karen Purvis and the late Dr. Karen Purvis and people who have carried on TBRI, we often hear the, don't send them to timeout. And I always tell people timeout is very different than letting a kid have their space. And for a teenager, having space does not mean, oh, I'm sending them to timeout, I should never let them go to their bedroom. And I feel like I've noticed that in a lot of foster and adoptive parents is they take that no timeout as they should never go to their room. Teenagers often need that, right? But for them to know like, oh, I'm right here. Hey, I'm going to be out shooting some hoops, or I'm going to be sitting here playing this video game. Come join me when you want to. That's a very different stance than you can't go to your bedroom or you have to be right next to me. So just wanted to kind of point out that difference as well. And as we continue in parenting tips, what are some parenting strategies or tips that worked well with you and ultimately helped you heal through the process of being in care? And maybe being adopted too.
Oh, okay. I feel like it always feels funny answering this because I'm like, I'm not a parent. I've never parented. But I can say, like, for me, just a few things off the top of my head that, um, yeah, between my foster and my adoptive parents that were really helpful and things that were harder. I'm going to be really transparent on this podcast or on this webinar and say an unhealthy marriage displayed in my foster parents caused some harm in me, but a healthy marriage with my adoptive parents is what ultimately like loved me back to life. And so I would say, regardless, like, of course, I'm so excited that if there are single foster or adoptive parents watching this, like, so grateful for you. That's amazing. But if you are someone who is in a marriage and you are fostering and adopting together, just prioritizing your marriage and the health of it is so huge. I feel like that's maybe not like a parenting tip someone would think of, but for me, I would say that's the number one thing that played the biggest difference was the health of a marriage and my healing process. And so for a lot of the youth like I who didn't come from a home where there was healthy parents, getting to experience that was just and still has been so healing for my life. So that's the first thing I'd say. And also because it's harder to parent if you're not on the same page. And the youth in your home, especially when they're teenagers, like we're very aware what's going on. And so we're very aware and we can feel when there are things that are off between the people who are supposed to be putting our best interests first. So I just want to say that before anything else. I think one of the other things is, like you guys have talked about, just like correction and about consequences. I think that doing it in a healthy way where there is explanations behind rules, where there is room to ask questions about certain rules or all that stuff, I think would be huge because in my case, for quite a bit of my time in foster care, I'm grateful that I had like foster parents who were really, really aware and very empathetic for what I had walked through. In turn, because they had so much empathy towards me, which I'm so glad, but there were some things that I wish I would have been corrected about, or I would have just experienced correction in general, but in a healthy way, because there was never any correction out of fear of hurting me. I, as an adult, had to learn that if someone's giving me critical feedback, if someone's suggesting something, or just if someone's saying something to me like that might not be the most easiest to hear, I took that immediately like, oh, this person hates me. And I became very defensive. I mean, even in workplace scenarios, even in schooling, it's like I did not know how to receive that. And so it might seem surprising to hear that, but that's one thing that I really wish I would have experienced because now knowing like even as an adult, when my parents like correct me or suggest something, I'm like, oh, you're doing this because you love me, not because you hate me. And I think that's huge just because of having so much rejection and so much I was always just so defensive of myself. And so I think having the healthy experience of that has been huge in shaping who I am now today. But I wish I would have learned how to do that earlier on because it definitely delayed me. And then I would also say, I think I mentioned this earlier, but just like room to fail and grace to recover. I think that's huge. I'm very grateful that like I feel like with my foster and adoptive parents, because they're separate couples, but both couples were really good at that. When I did do something, like they extended so much grace and I didn't ever have to, like, in my mind, because of my past and insecurity, I would question. I would think, oh, I'm just like two incidents away from them changing their minds about me. Even as an adult being legally adopted, there were times early on where I was still so insecure. I would literally ask my parents, like, if I like had an emotional outburst or something, I would say to them, like, okay, so are you guys gonna unadopt me now? And I know like Tracy had mentioned something along the lines earlier of it's like that's not even something we would consider. That's not an option. And I'm grateful that I had parents like, and this is more speaking to adoptive parents, but like my adoptive parents always would say to me like this, like not being a family, not having you as our daughter is not an option. Like that's not something that we even talk about because that's not something that's possible. And I remember it took probably like 10 times of them saying that to me because I was still always just the first instinct is like, okay, you're gonna unadopt me now, so just tell me if you're gonna do it. But it took, I mean, probably 10 times before I'm like, oh, like they're serious. Like when I say that, like thinking that that's an option, like they're like shut it down immediately. Like that's not even something we're gonna spend a minute talking about because it's not a reality. Um, and so I think that that like was huge for me. It's just like implementing like safety and consistency and like reminding me that time and time again. So yeah, I guess like those are two or a few big things for me that made a big difference.
That's beautiful. And I love that. Like I've heard it as the marriage of adoption and being able to keep that and keep that oath as the parents. I know Bobby and I, our three that we adopted at older ages, all three of them, we've had to go through some really hard things. And I feel like those hard things have been the most healing because when we've gone through the hard things with them and we've been able to look at them and be like, you know, we're still choosing you. We're still saying yes, even though this happened or even though you did this. It grew their trust and their understanding like, oh, they really are going to stick with this. And for one kiddo, that happened early on, about 6 months into him being with us. And it was a pretty big thing. But to be able to walk through that and say, we love you, we still choose you, even though this was really hard to experience in our home, it brought us to a healing. And we are super close to this day. I mean, super, super close. But I think we needed that moment for him to be like, okay, they're serious about this. They're not going anywhere. And we've had to show that like now with our younger kids, our younger kids, our youngest two that are adopted, their birth mom just died. And we just had to explain that to them a couple of days ago. And instantly they're 5 and 7. And instantly our 5-year-old goes to, what's going to happen if you and daddy die someday? So her brain is going back to like, she couldn't care for me. What happens if you can't care for me? She's 5. Now imagine a 15-year-old or 18-year-old going through this. They're thinking about these things and we need to make it, apparent and very clear to them that we're sticking with this. Even if you're a foster parent, that's why I say, be very mindful of the kiddos that you welcome into your door, be thoughtful of it, think about the hard things, and then try your best to stick with it as long as they need. That's not saying, that kids should never move to another home. There are times and places. Sometimes it's best for the kid even. But ultimately, they really need to know, like, these people are with me for as long as I need to be with them. And adoption, that means forever.
Mhm.
Okay, briefly, Tracy, I know a lot of times in most states, teens can stay in care actually till age 21. So a lot of people think 18, they're out. No, they can actually stay in care until 21. Some of them even, I've heard 22 now in a couple of states. Tracy, I know you guys have used contracts. Can you briefly just describe like what is the contract and why would you use that for maybe a teenager or now an adult in your home?
Yeah, I feel like it sounds so harsh. I always have to preface with people. I'm like, it's not as harsh as it sounds. Um, so we, with our oldest son, when he was a teenager, he used to argue with me till he was blue and red in the face, whatever. Like he'd make me crazy because he would just, you never said that kind of stuff. And I was like, we're going to start making contracts so that it's very clear of what the rule is, what was said, and you sign it. So we learned that back then. And so when our son moved in, I was like, I think we should do a contract with him. And we sat down to think through what that would be. And partly it was just like, what are our house rules? And you've lived in places that might have very different styles of living together than our house has. So it included things even like you knock on a door before you go in, you wait for a response, something like that, like just being really clear. And then things like curfew and rules about cell phones for our kids, like plugging their cell phone in the hallway and being really clear about what that is, just getting things really clear on paper. And then also my husband and I, there's a spot on there of what we commit to do for them, of we will be honest, we will be open, we want to listen to you, like just we'll be supportive, you can call us anytime for a ride, like just spelling it all out. And both of our adopted kids have said that they've really appreciated having that it was so clear, that they didn't have to wonder, was there going to be an emotional, like me making an emotional consequence because they upset me? But instead, it's all on paper and they just knew what to expect. And I also found that especially the very first time we sat down with each of, because we renew it every semester or every school year, kind of whenever we need to, type of thing, but typically not more than every semester. But especially those first times with our adopted kiddos, it was such a time of connection, to just sit down and talk through and let them ask questions, and it helped bring up things that instead of them wondering, "How are things gonna be in this house?" We just got to lay it all out there, and for them to know, I mean, it's pretty clear on there, like, the first time you have a consequence for something, it's loss of cell phone privileges for a day. The second time for the same thing, it's like it grows, so just being really clear, I think really helped them. And then actually for our son, he had to go to a treatment program for a while. And that program, when he graduated from that, they actually helped us develop what was called Us Together, him and us. He got to make the first draft and then we got to work on it together. It was called a game plan. And it was even more specific. It had house rules, but then it also had really specific stuff about consequences and also rewards and things like that. But we used that for a good 2 years with him. And he found a lot of relief in it, that it was clear, and I'd even say to him, "Pull it up on your cell phone, let's look at it." And that it wasn't gonna be, our daughter would say some of her experiences in foster care, there was emotional responses from her caregivers. So one day a consequence might be very different than the next day, and so she's really appreciated that it's on paper. She doesn't have to wonder, which then she also jokes and says, "I barely ever get in trouble." I'm like, "Yeah, it's true. You stick pretty close to the line there all the time." So yeah, having those contracts in place, and then even as our son's 21 or 20 now, and our older daughter lives at home again, and so we have a contract with her as well, just so everything's clear and we don't have to wonder what each other's thinking when it comes to like coming in and out at the middle of the night or whatever it might be. Chores. Like, well, I'm a grown up now. I don't have to. No, you got to do more chores. You live in this house. You got to help take care of it. So, yeah, it's been very helpful for our family.
Great tip and ideas, Tracy. Kind of related, Bobby, let's flip electronics. It's everybody's favorite and easiest thing to navigate, right? Easiest thing about parenting these days is electronics. Bobby, how do we handle electronics at our home? Especially thinking about a teenager who's brand new into our door, like comes up 5 o'clock at night at our house for the first time. How do we handle that? What do you suggest families do or maybe not do?
Yeah, definitely a hot topic, and we all know that. I'm a pretty cut and dry person, and I used to handle this in our home pretty cut and dry, but I've had to evolve, honestly. And where we've kind of landed is we definitely take it serious. Statistically, we could have a whole webinar on this for an hour and a half, right? Of the dangers and the consequences attributed to the use of it, unhealthy use of it. But where we've landed is we just find an opportunity to explain to them, hey, you're in our home. And we talked about it briefly earlier that our primary job is to give you a safe landing place. We need to keep you safe from external hazards to internal hazards, internal being your cell phone and who has access to your phone, who you're accessing. And we just really paint that picture for them. And often, like most often, people are like, okay, versus, hey, you're welcome to the Williams home. Give me your phone, give me your keys, give me your wallet, open your bag. Like, that's not going to work. I mean, it can actually, it does, but you're not going to attain very much connection that we talked about earlier. And so we've tried to just navigate this from we need to keep you safe until we know who you're talking to, until we know who's trying to talk to you, until we kind of know what your interests are electronically. Hey, do us a favor for tonight. Put your phone up here. And we always make it a point too, like, this isn't just an Annika rule. Look, there's 4 other phones right here. All of our other kids' phones are right here. So we just try to really explain it from a standpoint of we're safe. And part of that is keeping you safe. And that's honestly, I think, Courtney, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of been our approach as of late. Really, the past year, we've kind of changed this because we've had people just show up randomly at our house saying, hey, is Joe here? And it has like honestly scared me, because we don't know who these people are and all the things that people can track. And trust me, I'm about as novice as it comes when it comes to phones, but guys, the amount of people that are connected to those phones, it is something to be taken serious, but I would just encourage you, don't hit them like they're entering a jail cell of stripping them of all the rights. Explain it to them and allow them to go. And then we always say, does that make sense? And again, oftentimes we're like, yeah, I get it. No problem, Mr. Williams. And then we always lastly say, hey, and I think Annika, you said this earlier, if there's anything that doesn't make sense now or tomorrow or a rule that we say and you're like, whatever, I'm not going to listen. Like, we always say, don't not listen to it. Please just come and talk to me, because there's oftentimes there's room. This is where we're starting. And if you think we need to navigate 2 feet to the right or 1 foot to the left, like, maybe. I'm not going to say it's guaranteed, but we give them voice, and that's ultimately our cell phone policy. But we do closely monitor it, and I would encourage everyone, like, you really have to, keeping in mind, at the very least, it's your job to keep these kids safe. End of story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll just add, we've also, it used to be kind of have that sit down talk, if they get there at 5 o'clock, we better have it that night. And we don't necessarily do that anymore. If a kid comes at 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, that first night isn't the night. We often just let them take their phone downstairs, do what they're, settle in for a night. And then, the next day we'll sit down and have this conversation. We do have it written out, and it's written out, and we have it as the Williams house rules for every person that's in this home. So again, it's not specific to one child. It's not changed for your name. This is for everybody. And really, I think kids need to know that too, and really feel that, like Bobby said, that we're not singling you out and saying this is different for you because you're a foster child or whatever. It's like, no, these are just our rules across the board. Generally speaking, we say no cell phones and computers in rooms, but we've also bended on that before, like, hey, yeah, they need to have a private conversation. Yes, that can be done in your bedroom. Or, hey, I'm studying for this test and it's on my computer. Can I bring my computer in? And it's like, okay, with the door open, face this way so we can see what you're up to if we walk by. Yes, it's not, there is some give and take. And I think kids need to know that too. Like, they can ask for a compromise. But there are also some rules that are going to be hard and fast for your safety, like Bobby said. Okay, before we close this out, I just want to bring up a couple of examples of maybe ways with connection and without just going straight to correction. Sometimes there's correction, right? Like Annika said, we've all mentioned it. Correction, we're not saying don't ever correct. But thinking of these things that are specific with teenagers, how would you respond to these situations? So Annika, you've got a kiddo in your care and they just keep breaking curfew. What would you do? What would you say? How would you handle that?
It's funny to put myself in the shoes of if I had a kid in my care, because I'm like, I was the kid in care. But thankfully, the times I did break curfew, it was like because I was at like youth group service too long or out with friends after church. I wasn't really doing like bad stuff. But I want to first say, like, Bobby, it was super refreshing to hear you even talking about your electronics policy, and when you were reiterating why you would tell the teens that it's because of their safety is why you're implementing these rules. Because when I think about curfew, that's something that one of my foster parents was like, I have this rule for you and you didn't listen, and like, I don't want to hear anything about what you're doing or why you're out. Like, basically, you have no right to say anything. You're in my house, so listen to me. Where on the contrast, the other foster parent was more like you, where my foster mom would say, like, I'm doing this not because I want to control you. It's because you're a young girl and I'm supposed to protect you. And so it's unsafe when you're away, and I worry and I care about you and I love you, all this stuff. And that's ultimately her care for me and her advocacy for me being the reason why there were rules implemented is actually what caused me to like really respect rules more in the home. And so like hearing what you said, I'm like, wow, it's healing to hear that. Like, even though obviously I'm not in foster care anymore, but to know there are foster parents like who are, this is how you're communicating to the youth, because I know that in my life, like that would have been a lot more refreshing and it would have been a lot more effective. And so all that to say, I think that if I had a youth in my home, that's how I would implement it with curfew, is like, because I care about you, because my job is to put you first and to put your safety and your well-being first. This is why it's important for you to, come home before it's late out, before it's dark out, before there's unknown things or like more crime happening. And I think that like if they were to break it, which like probably they would because they're a teenager and they're a normal person. But I think it is like what you said. It's like, not that there's not any correction, but I mean, I've never been a parent, so I can't like, I don't want to like pretend I know like what like a good like consequence would be. But I think just reiterating like why that curfew is there in place and just talking about like in life, like there will be certain there will be certain environments you're in, whether it's in school or whether you're in a job, like there's going to be rules, there's going to be employee handbooks, and there's reasons why there are rules. And like, this is just practice for like respect and being like a successful person who like is a team player. Like these are important why that you follow the word. And I think for a lot of, former foster youth, like we have had a lot of broken promises and unfulfilled promises in our lives. And so that was a huge thing even for me, is like I actually had friends who would call me out and be like, well, you said you were going to hang out with me today, and then I heard you ended up hanging out with someone else. Like, why can't you stick to what you say? And it took me a long time to realize it's like I didn't value that in my own life because I was failed by so many people who didn't show up that way for me. And I do feel like sometimes when it comes to rule, it was the same thing. Like I was like, well, all these other people say one thing and do another. So like, why does it matter if I like do what I want, kind of a thing? It's like I didn't have honor and respect for that because it wasn't displayed to me. But I think getting to learn that now and getting like I have way more of a value for that than even some of my friends who didn't experience kind of trauma and stuff like that, because I'm like, oh, I know what it feels like to be on the other side of that. So I think that's something else I'd reiterate. Like this will help set you up for success and for like a healthy life all around.
That's great. That's great. Tracy, what would you do if a kid came home from school, teenage came home from school, or you got a phone call that they got in a fight at school that day?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to dovetail off of what Annika said of that often, even to my kiddos, I say, it's not about right now, it's about who you're becoming. And I want to help you become somebody that is more grown up, more mature, more caring than you currently are. So often helping them look in that direction. I think the same for a school fight would be, instead of saying something like, how dare you, or I'm ashamed, or what made you do that? I would approach it of the thought of like, okay, what was underneath? What was there? And so I would ask questions of like, wow, something must have been going on for you today. What got you into that situation? And so first making sure I really see and hear the kiddo and what got them into that situation where there was a fight, and that they feel I have to work on this all the time because my natural instinct is to kind of correct or teach. So, but instead to stay in that spot of like just helping them feel seen and heard and understood. And then I would even take it a few layers. I've done this lots of times with my kids of then helping them when they're ready, when they felt seen and heard, helping them kind of back up and think of what could they have done differently in the day leading up to that time so that they could have maybe not ended up in the fight or made the fight end quicker or gone to a teacher or whatever, helping them back it up and think through, well, it didn't just happen. Something led towards it. What could you have done differently? What could you do differently next time? But definitely first help them feel seen and heard by just listening. And and we have to prepare ourselves to just really listen and to not be upset or judgy or whatever it would be, but for them to feel like anything's okay for them
Yeah,
to process.
definitely. Lastly, Bobby, what about a kiddo in our home that's not following the cell phone policy? What would you do?
Yeah, a lot of it falls in the same plane that we just heard. This happens often, even with our own children. Unfortunately, but we've always tried to, again, what both of you just got done saying, explain the whole, hey, you've asked me to do a lot of things, don't do this, or you've asked me to do this, and I've honored that. Right? Yeah, yes, Mr. Williams, or yes, Dad. I've asked you to do a few things, and one of them is, don't close this door or don't take this cell phone into your bedroom and leave it in your bedroom at night. And you chose not to do that. Is that very honoring in your opinion? No. Um, walk them through that. And I don't know. I mean, I think we all try to skate around the consequences, but with cell phones, honestly, it's pretty easy. Like, hey, you've chosen not to honor a request that I've made of you, and we both just agreed that it's for your good. The realistic thing that I would do is say, hey, you have lost your cell phone for a day. I'm not going to make it like you lost your phone for a year. I mean, that's not smart. But make it real to them a little bit. Like, hey, you didn't honor what I asked. I've honored to you, and this is how this connection works. Is you ask of me, I ask of you. We bend, but this was kind of a pretty clear thing. You chose not to. You've admitted it. I've given you my reasons. You've lost your cell phone for a day, a half a day, whatever it is. But that's an easy one for me. But I guess my overarching point would be, no matter the consequence, make it real. realistic. I mean, grounding someone for a month or whatever for a cell phone violation is kind of harsh. But that said, it also depends. Honestly, cell phones are, I mean, did they just take it in and forget it on their nightstand for a night? Or were they looking at inappropriate things and showing things to young kids? And I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like, what are you doing? And then weight your consequence to it, but just
Mhm.
explain it out to them and make sure at the end of the day that they to the best ability can see where you're coming from. Give them an opportunity to own it versus just being like, I screwed up, I'm a failure, broke a rule, lost my phone. Like, try to explain it to them like an adult and allow them to own.
I will say cell phones are a big thing. Computers are a big thing. It's a big area of parenting right now. We did just recently do a podcast. The three hosts of the Foster Friendly podcast, we did a whole podcast episode on electronics. So if you want more information on that, check out that episode and can get some more tips and tools and thoughts around electronics and why they're such a big deal. Maybe some things that you haven't thought about before as foster parents, kind of like Bobby mentioned, their location being on. And we had a kid, the one Bobby was alluding to, he was just got done telling us about being part of this gang and guys that are after him. And the next thing we know, somebody's showing up at our door. I mean, that same day, somebody's showing up at our doorstep. And we're like, is this somebody that's here out to get him? Is this somebody that's his friend? We had no clue. So there's just things that we maybe don't even think about that we need to be thinking about as foster and adoptive and parents in general. And cell phones are important. So, okay, as we wrap up this webinar, Annika, I want you to answer this question. What would you say teens in foster care really need is?
They need, oh man, that's hard. I feel like there's so much, but also it can be so simple. I think if I had to pick three things, I would say unconditional love, consistency, and ultimately belonging.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, taking that a little bit further, Annika, why should somebody consider fostering teens? Because we know it's a huge need right now. Encourage somebody. Why should they think about it?
The first thing I'd say is that if someone is watching this, then I mean, it's probably like unlikely that it was an accident that they clicked on it. So there's a reason why you were intrigued. And I would say to lean into that and not just leave it at that. Like really like explore why you were drawn to learning more about teens. I think it's pretty well known that like in the foster care and the adoption world, the stereotypical thing is like you guys had mentioned already that people want younger kids, but there are so many teenagers and youth who are out there who have that same desire, have that same longing for a family, and we are not any less deserving of that. Sure, when you think about a teenager, you think like, okay, they've lived over a decade of life, or they've lived, you know, this amount of time longer with trauma and longer with things, but think about the fact that you can play a part in helping them live the rest of their lives in a healthy and a healed state. For me, being a teenager in foster care and experiencing, I guess, like really like what love felt like for the first time in my life, it absolutely changed my life. And anyone out there who, you don't have to be like a special person, you just have to have a yes in your heart and a consistent choosing of the youth that you have in your home. You have that same capacity to change the life of someone else. And so I'm so grateful that I had foster parents and I have adoptive parents who have continually said yes to me, who have chosen me throughout everything in my life. For so many years, I couldn't even look people in the eyes. There were so many things that were like, quote unquote, normal that I never could do or never thought I would ever be able to do because of what had happened to me in my past. And it's through the healing of love and the healing of people that I've been able to live a life where I can thrive. And that really came through permanency. It came through having a place to belong, wanting a family, wanting a place to fit was the biggest desire of my life for 26 years. I just wanted to know I had somewhere to be. I wanted to know that there were people with open arms towards me and who wanted me and accepted me no matter what. And after I found that, I was able to rest for the first time in my life and to truly start living from that place on. So I would just say to anyone who's considering or even thinking about it, these teens need you. Over 23,000 youth age out of the foster care system every year with honestly mostly no support. And in my job, I get to interact with them every day. And most common thing is I just need a meal for tonight. Or unable to think about a brighter future because their practical needs are not met. They don't have parents to fall back on. They don't really have friends. They have nobody. And so we get the opportunity to step in, and there's so many different ways we can do it. But if you're watching this and you're thinking about fostering or adopting a teenager, as somebody whose life was changed by someone like you who said yes to it, I would my ask would be that you would just into that and not ignore that, because you could be changing a life of somebody who won't have to age out and live alone and do life by themselves.
That's awesome and beautiful. Thanks for sharing. And that's how we're going to end it, because I think you just said it perfectly of the why. These kids, they come with pasts, pasts that do affect them, but they do not have to determine their futures. And as foster parents, adoptive parents, we get to be part of that journey, that beautiful journey of seeing them heal, hopefully heal, or go through some healing through our homes. And yeah, it's beautiful to be part of that journey. So thanks for joining us today, Annika, Tracy, and Bobby. Hopefully those of you that are listening have been encouraged and will consider, if you're not already, to foster or adopt teens.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation that we had today. Again, thank you for joining us. And our speakers, again, I give thanks to Annika, Tracy, and Bobby for giving up their time. I hope you learned a lot from them and just encouraged you in your journey. Again, whether you're already fostering and adopting teens or considering it. I also want you to know that we have many more webinars coming up. We have 3 more in this series of understanding. So understanding food insecurities, understanding your permanent kids' needs, and understanding cultural differences. 3 important topics. We already have others done in this series and many more at FosterCon.org. So I encourage you to go there, go to FosterCon.org, check out the things that we have. Most states, most people or agencies will recognize these and will let you use them as for CE credit, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Also, I just want you to know that it takes a lot of time and resources to curate programs like this. So we would love to have you consider making a donation to America's Kids Belong. You can use that QR code, or you can go to americaskidsbelong.org and choose donate for your tax-deductible gift. Again, we would appreciate that. And to get your CE credit. So you can jump back onto fostercon.org. There's a button there that says get CE credit. You will fill out a short form. There's one form that you will do for each webinar that you watch. And I personally make these webinar certificates. So just know that they take a little bit of time. Within a week, you'll have them to your email inbox. One for yourself. If you have a spouse or a partner doing it as well, make sure they fill out their own form so you get your own certificates. But we love to be able to offer these for free as for CE credit. I also tell people you can listen to them as well. They are listed on YouTube, so sometimes you can pop one in while you're driving kids back and forth, listen to it, fill out the form, and get your credit that way as well. And then just wanted you to know, we have 3 major programs through America's Kids Belong, and then within those programs, we have 3 things that are just really reaching the hearts and the doors of foster families. We have Fostering Front Door, where you can go there if you are looking for more support in your fostering journey, whether you're already fostering or you're consider fostering. Foster Friendly Podcast. We have a podcast now that comes out every Wednesday. We have a great guest lineup, former foster youth, caseworkers, government officials, pastors, all sorts of people from different spheres in the foster care equation that really just help equip and inspire us. And then, of course, this FosterCon series that we have, again, go to fostercon.org. Thanks again for joining us. I hope you have a great day.